September 1st of 1990. 30 years ago the Sega Mega Drive was brought to Brazil by Tectoy, becoming the longest running console in our country, outliving stronger competitors like the Super Nintendo and the PlayStation. The following list is a top 30 of Mega Drive games brought to Brazil by Tectoy, in alphabetical order. The list will be narrated by my AI assistant Cortina. It's with you, Cortina.
Altered Beast. Developed and published by Sega, this game was released originally to the Sega System 16 arcade board in June of 1988, and later it was ported to the Mega Drive as the first pack-in game. In Brazil, the Mega Drive port was released officially in 1993, not as a pack-in game though. It's a scrolling beat-em-up where you assume the role of a Roman centurion who is resurrected by the Greek god Zeus to rescue his daughter Athena from the evil god Neph. In the beginning of the gameplay, the player literally breaks out of his coffin under Zeus' command to rise from your grave. At each of the 5 stages, the player begins as a weak human that can only punch and kick and has to defeat miniatures of the dog Cerberus to obtain the spirit balls and gain power-ups. The first and second spirit balls make the player stronger and the third spirit ball transforms him into a powerful beast with supernatural abilities. In the first stage, the player transforms into a werewolf. In the second stage, into a were-dragon. In the third stage, into a were-bear. In the fourth stage, into a were-tiger. And in the final stage, into the golden werewolf, a more powerful version of the werewolf. Each transformation has a quick and unique cutscene, except the werewolf and the golden werewolf, who share the same cutscene. Each stage repeats the same scenario twice. If you fail to transform into the beast at the end of the first scenario, Neph will spawn in the second scenario and state "Welcome to your doom," and the boss battle will begin, regardless of if you have transformed or not. Ayrton Senna's Super Monaco GP2. Developed and published by Sega, it's an arcade-style Formula One racing game starred by the Brazilian Formula One pilot Ayrton Senna. It was released worldwide in 1992 for Mega Drive, Master System, and Game Gear. The game was initially suggested by Sega's then distributor in Brazil, Tectoy, but it was developed by Sega in Japan. Its development was assisted by Senna himself, who gave advice on the tracks featured in the game, as well as recorded voiceovers to the same. Bonanza Brothers. Developed and published by Sega, this game was released for the Sega System 24 arcade system board in 1990 and ported for the Mega Drive in 1991. It's a stealth shooter platform game where you assume the role of one of the titular brothers, who are recruited by the police chief of Bad Valley to test security facilities and help the police recover evidence from various crooked businesses and institutions, but on the threat of jail if they fail to do so. It can be played either by one player or by 2 players simultaneously, as the screen is always split in 2. Comics Zone. Developed by Sega Technical Institute, a defunct division of Sega of America, and published by Sega of America, it was released to the Genesis in North America and to the Mega Drive in Brazil and Europe. It's a beat-em-up with a unique level design where you navigate across comic book panels with dialogue rendered within talk bubbles, onomatopoeia, and hand-drawn backgrounds. You play as Sketch Turner, a cartoonist who is imprisoned within his comic book by his own creations and needs to fight his way back to the real world. The game has 2 possible endings, a good ending and a bad ending, depending on whether you succeed or fail on saving Sketch's girlfriend in the final battle. Crew Ball, Heavy Metal Pinball. Developed by NewFX and published by Electronic Arts, it was released to the Mega Drive in 1992. It's a heavy metal-themed pinball video game whose title is borrowed from the band Motley Crue, and it features 3 of their songs, Dr. Feelgood, Live Wire, and Home Sweet Home. The game has an excuse plot. Late night, a man comes home from work and goes to play pinball with heavy metal music at all volume, while his neighbors yell at him to shut it off. You are this man and your goal is to outscore yourself, and the metal only shuts when you are done playing. Decap Attack starring Chuck D. Head. Developed by Vic Tokai Corporation and published by Sega, this game was released in 1991 to the Genesis in North America and to the Mega Drive in Europe and Brazil. It's a westernized version of the 1990 Mega Drive game Magical Hat's Turbo Flight Adventure, which features different characters, story, art, music, and level design, but the same general gameplay. Due to the game's developer failing to secure the Magical Hat license outside Japan, it was completely redone and released in 1991 as Decap Attack. It's a platform action game where you play as Chuck D. Head, a headless mummy created by mad scientist Dr. Frankenstein and his assistant Igor, and have to defeat the demon Max Decap to reassemble the skeleton-shaped island where Chuck lives so he can be transformed back into a living human. SWAT, City Under Siege. Also known as Cyber Police, SWAT, City Under Siege. This game was developed and published by Sega for the Mega Drive in 1990 in Japan and North America and in 1991 in Brazil. It's a side-scrolling platform action game based on the 1989 arcade game Cyber Police, SWAT. While the arcade version is a 2-player cooperative game, the console version is a 1-player game. Both versions feature a cop named Duke Oda that starts as a normal human fighting regular criminals and upgrades into a cyborg with superpowers fighting cybernetic threats. Fatal Fury, King of Fighters. Developed and published by SNK to the Neo Geo MVS arcade system in 1991, this game was ported by Takara to the Mega Drive in 1993. It's a 2.5D fighting game with an innovative feature where the player can switch between 2 lanes, a foreground lane and a background lane. The arcade mode has 3 playable characters, Andy Bogard, Terry Bogard, and Joe Higashi. It also has a 2-on-1 feature. When the second player joins the battle, both players fight the CPU-controlled fighter before facing each other. The Versus mode allows both players to play as the CPU-controlled characters, including the final boss Geese Howard via a cheat code. Golden Axe 2. Developed and published by Sega, this game was released exclusively to the Mega Drive in 1992. It's a side-scrolling hack-and-slash action game and the home console sequel to the arcade game Golden Axe, and features the return of the 3 original characters from the first game, Axe Battler, a barbarian with wind magic, Taurus Flare, an Amazon with fire magic, and Julius Thunderhead, a dwarf with earth magic. The game has 2 modes, normal game, that is basically the story mode, and the duel, a survival arena where you must defeat 15 waves of enemies with only 1 life and without magics. In the normal game, the final stage is not accessible in the easy mode. You have to play the normal or hard mode if you want to reach the final boss battle against Dark Gould. Haunting starring Poltergeist. Developed and published by Electronic Arts to the Mega Drive in 1993, this is a comedy horror game where you assume the role of Poltergeist, a vengeful ghost of a boy killed in an accident with a defective skateboard. obsessed with haunting a house and scaring the resident family out of there. As Poltergeist, you have to scare the 4 horrible members of the filthy rich family Sardini. Vito Sardini, a greedy executive owner of the company that manufactured the skateboard that killed Poltergeist; Flo Sardini, the shallow and spendthrift wife whose greatest loves are furs and her Chinese crested dog; Tony Sardini, the mean-spirited son whose favorite hobby is tormenting his sister and watching horror movies; and Mimi Sardini, the creepy daughter whose passion is poisoning things. Beware of the Chinese crested dog. It has the power of calming down the family members and it can send you back to the underworld, where you can definitely die and have a game over. It also is the final boss of the game. Indiana Jones and the Last Crusade. Developed by Tiertex Design Studios and published by US Gold, this is an action-adventure game released to the Mega Drive in 1992, loosely based on the homonymous film and starred by Harrison Ford. As in the movie, the player's quest is to find the Holy Grail. En route, the player must find the Cross of Coronado, the Knight of the First Crusade's shield and Indiana's father's Grail diary. It's the typical trial-and-error arcade-style game with a long learning curve to the point of being frustrating. It doesn't help the fact of the game having limited lives and continues. Justice League Task Force. Developed by Sunsoft and Blizzard North, and published by Acclaim Entertainment, this game was released to the Mega Drive in 1995. It's the very first DC fighting game, years before Mortal Kombat vs. DC Universe and Injustice: Gods Among Us. The roster is very small due to the memory limitations of the 16-bit console though. In the hero mode you can choose between Superman, Batman, Wonder Woman, The Flash, Aquaman, and Green Arrow. In the versus modes you can also play as the 3 bosses Cheetah, Despero, and Darkseid. It's the typical 90s fighting game with clunky controls, long learning curve and the punishing stun feature. Although it's compensated by the beautifully drawn backgrounds and sprites and the OK music. Kid Chameleon. Developed by Sega Technical Institute and published by Sega of America, it was released to the Mega Drive in 1992. It's an unusual platform game with 135 non-linear levels distributed in multiple paths allowing a myriad of different playthroughs each game session. You play as Kid Chameleon, a boy in a mission to rescue kids trapped in a virtual reality game where he can morph into powerful characters by wearing special masks. Kid Chameleon can transform into 10 different forms, including Kid Chameleon himself, depending on the mask he's wearing. Each mask has its own and unique set of abilities. Last Battle. Developed and published by Sega, it was released in Brazil to the Mega Drive by Tectoy in 1991. It's a side-scrolling beat-em-up action game and the westernized version of the game Hokuto no Ken released to the Mega Drive in 1989. Based on the homonymous manga series. Due to Sega International not being able to obtain the licensing for the Hokuto no Ken series, the characters' sprites and names were altered, as well as the title itself. You play as the hero Arzuki, Ken's hero in the Japanese original. The gameplay is basically the same in both versions, except all the gore from the Japanese original was removed on the international versions so the enemies fly off the screen rather than exploding. Mighty Morphin Power Rangers, the movie. Developed by Banpresto and published by Sega, it was released to the Mega Drive in 1995. It's a side-scrolling beat-em-up action game that follows the plot of the film. The Power Rangers have to save Earth from the menace of Evanus. The differential of the Mega Drive version from other console versions is that you start already transformed into a Power Ranger of your choice in the stage course fighting against the Uzman, Ivan Uza's minions. Then in the boss battle you control a Megazord of your choice against a monster. Another very cool differential of the Mega Drive version is that it contains a public service announcement for the children. Please remember the difference between fantasy and reality. Do your fighting on the screen, not at home or at school. Nightmare Circus. Developed by Funcom and published by Tectoy, this game had a physical release exclusively in Brazil in 1996. It's a platform survival horror game where you assume the role of Raven, a Native American man who is investigating an abandoned circus where his parents died in a fire years ago. Raven has a set of attacks and movements to fight the supernatural creatures he encounters in the circus. Raven has only one life and no life bar, so you must be careful not to get hit at all or you can suddenly die and it's game over. It's pretty much a trial and error game. Outrun. Developed and published by Sega, it was released to the Sega Outrun arcade board in 1991 and ported to the Mega Drive in 1991. It was brought to Brazil by Tectoy in 1992. It's a 3D driving game where you assume the role of an everyman who is riding with his girl and have to pass determined checkpoints within the time limit until the end of the ride. If you run out of time before you reach the checkpoint, it's game over. There are no circuits. At the end of each track there is a bifurcation where you must decide which track you will take next, left or right. There are 15 tracks at total, of which the player must complete 5 of them each game session, making this a non-linear driving game. Folios. Developed and published by Namco, it was released to the Namco System 2 arcade board in 1989 and ported to the Mega Drive in 1990. It was brought to Brazil by Tectoy in 1991. It's a vertical scrolling shooter game where you assume the role of Apollo, the Greek god of sun, who is in a quest to rescue his wife Athena, the Greek goddess of moon, who was kidnapped by the evil monster Typhon and transformed into stone by the Gorgon Medusa. In the gameplay, Apollo rides the winged horse Pegasus and wields a sword that shoots small projectiles but can be charged by holding the fire button to blast a gigantic fireball. The game has 7 stages and 2 game modes, the beginner mode where you can only go until stage 4 and the advanced mode where you play all 7 stages. Quackshot starring Donald Duck. Developed and published by Sega, it was released to the Mega Drive in 1991. Licensed by Disney, it's a platform game where you control Donald Duck in a Metroidvania-style adventure, inspired by Indiana Jones movies. Having 3 initial stages to explore, Donald needs to solve puzzles and complete dungeons to progress further in his quest to find a treasure he thinks can make him more rich than Uncle Scrooge. However, not everything is flowers, as Big Bad Pete's gang is following Donald to steal the treasure. But Donald is ready to fight Pete's minions with his plumber gun and other family-friendly weapons. Aside the elusive puzzles, the game is not very difficult, as it is a classic trial and error game with a fair learning curve. Road Rash. Developed and published by Electronic Arts, it was released to the Mega Drive in 1991. It's a motorcycle racing and vehicular combat game where the player can beat the crap out of the adversaries and knock them out of the track to win the race, but the player can also be knocked out by the CPU-controlled racers. The race and combat parts of the game are perfectly balanced. Road Rash was a critical and commercial success due to its violent and aggressive gameplay and convincing sense of speed in its graphics, being ported to several other systems and spawning 5 sequels at the length of 9 years. Shadow Dancer: The Secret of Shinobi. Developed and published by Sega, it was released to the Mega Drive in 1990. It was brought to Brazil by Tectoy in 1991. It's a side-scrolling hack-and-slash and the second game in the Shinobi series for Mega Drive. However, it's not a sequel to The Revenge of Shinobi but rather a loose adaptation of the 1989 arcade game Shadow Dancer. You control an unnamed ninja who is accompanied by his faithful dog Yamato. His mission is dismantling the evil ninja cult Union Lizard that took over the city of New York in the year 1997. The gameplay is quite different from other Shinobi games. Rather than having a health bar, the ninja dies in one hit, increasing the difficulty. Also, at every stage the ninja has one magic set on stone rather than selecting among different magics. And the dog can attack enemies at the ninja's command. His identity varies according to the region. In the Japanese version he's Heiate Musashi, son of Joe Musashi. In the English version he's Joe Musashi himself coming out of retirement. Show du Million. Developed and published by Tectoy, this game was released to the Mega Drive exclusively in Brazil in 2001. It's a quiz game based on the Brazilian TV program Show du Million, a licensed adaptation of the British game show Who Wants to Be a Millionaire. Hosted by Brazilian entertainer Silvio Santos, the program ran on SBT, Sistema Brasileiro de Televisão, from 1999 to 2003. The game follows the same formula of the TV program. The player must answer 16 questions of increasing difficulty with prizes that start with 1,000 and rise in value until the final 1 million question. If the player chooses the right answer, the prize rises. If the player chooses to stop, the game ends with last prize achieved. If the player chooses the wrong answer, the game ends with half of the last prize achieved. Sonic and Knuckles. Developed by Sega Technical Institute and published by Sega, it was released to the Mega Drive in 1994. It's a platform game and the sequel to Sonic the Hedgehog 3. In the title screen you can choose to play as Sonic or as Knuckles the Echidna, who in Sonic 3 was an NPC. It also is the only Mega Drive cartridge to have the lock-on technology, that allows players to open the hatch on the cartridge and insert a second cartridge. When Sonic 3 is inserted, the player can play through both games as one, Sonic 3 and Knuckles, where Knuckles becomes a playable character in the Sonic 3 stages. Inserting Sonic 2 unlocks Knuckles the Echidna in Sonic the Hedgehog 2, where the player can play Sonic 2 as Knuckles. Inserting any other Mega Drive game released prior to Sonic and Knuckles, a screen with Sonic, Tails, Knuckles, and Eggman stating "No way," is displayed. Strider. Developed and published by Capcom to the CPS-1 arcade system in 1989, this game was licensed and ported by Sega to the Mega Drive in 1990. Based on the limited manga series Strider Hero, it's a platform hack-and-slash set in a dystopian future in the year 2048, with a wide range of settings that affect gameplay. You play as Hero, a high-tech ninja whose mission is to assassinate a dictator known as the Grandmaster. Hiryu's weapon is a plasma sword whose attack range can be temporarily increased by one of the numerous power-ups present in the game. The game has 5 stages interluded by expositional cutscenes. In the original arcade game these cutscenes have voiceovers, but due to the technical limitations of the Mega Drive the voiceovers were removed in the home version. Truxton. Developed by Toplan and published by Sega, This game was released originally for arcades in 1988 and ported to the Mega Drive in 1989. It's a vertical scrolling shoot 'em up where you control a small space fighter whose ammunition and power-ups vary with the color of the spaceship. The red spaceship has the power shot that fires a fan of bullets. Its power-up provides a double shield that destroys any enemy that approaches. The green spaceship has the Truxton beam that fires powerful beams that hit enemies right in front of it. Its power-up provides 5 beams in succession. The blue spaceship has the thunder laser that fires lasers that lock on the enemy and don't let go of them until they are destroyed. Its power-up provides 5 lasers in succession. The game has 3 difficulty modes. The hard mode gives you 3 continues. The normal mode gives you 6 continues. The easy mode gives you free play. Ultimate Kicks. Developed and published by Taito, this game was released first to the arcades in 1989 under the title Volfield and ported to the Mega Drive in 1991 under the title Ultimate Kicks. It's an arcade-style action game where the player controls a spaceship initially confined on the borders of the stage. Its objective is to claim the stage by moving on straight lines, horizontal or vertical, and destroying parts of it. The spaceship can be destroyed when it moves out of the borders, but it is safe when it stays within the borders. The player advances to the next stage when 80% of the current stage is claimed. Virtua Fighter 2. Developed by Sega AM2 and published by Sega, this game was released to the Sega Model 2 arcade system in 1994 and ported to the Mega Drive in 1996. The Mega Drive port is a 2D fighting game with pre-rendered graphics and voiceovers imported from the Saturn version. The game is extremely easy as you can literally set your character to take no damage in the options and the minimum time is 10 seconds. It looks like Sega wanted to profit from the Virtua Fighter brand with little to no effort. World of Illusion starring Mickey Mouse and Donald Duck. Developed by Sega AM7 and published by Sega, this game was released in 1992 for Mega Drive. It's a platform adventure game where you can play solo as either Mickey or Donald, or cooperatively with 2 players controlling Mickey and Donald. In the game, Mickey and Donald are sent to a magical world by Big Bad Pete and have to work together in order to find a way back home. The game has beautiful foreground and background graphics and realistically animated sprites for both Mickey and Donald, as well as the NPCs. The gameplay is balanced and easy to complete for small children. X-Men 2: Clone Wars. Developed by Head Games and published by Sega, this game was released to the Mega Drive in 1995. It's a platform action game based on the Marvel Comics of the X-Men. Initially you control 6 heroes of the X-Men: Beast, Cyclops, Gambit, Nightcrawler, Psylocke, and Wolverine. Later in the game you can play as the villain Magneto. Rather than opening with the title screen as usual, the game boots straight in a prologue stage where you play as a random X-Man in a snowy scenario where you fight ninjas of the hand. After completing the first stage, the title screen and credits roll and the player is given the option to switch characters. The player has a health bar that can be replenished by gathering DNA symbols placed in the stages. Yu Hakusho: Sunset Fighters. Developed by Treasure Incorporated and published by Sega and Tectoy, this game was released to the Mega Drive in 1994 in Japan and in 1999 in Brazil. It's a fighting game based on the manga series Yu Hakusho. The game is for up to 4 players simultaneous using the Sega Multi-Top 4-player adapter. The game modes range from 2-player 1-on-1, 3-player Battle Royale and 4-player Battle Royale or Tag Team. Similar to Fatal Fury, the arenas have two grounds, a foreground and a background where the fighters can switch freely. The Brazilian port was fully translated to Portuguese with some changes in the players' names. Yuzuki, for example, became Yurei.